It's the 29th of January 2017. Welcome to episode 25 of RapBabble, the weekly hip-hop podcast. And this week, things are a bit quiet. But I have found two stories to talk about, two things to talk about. And they are actually album releases rather than stories. But there are two acts that are coming out with albums that have already been out. They've already been dropped. And they are opposed. They are very different. Totally different sides of the spectrum. So let's go for it. So the first one is Migos. And Migos, they are number one at the moment. And they've just hit their peak, their absolute peak. Like, this is their moment. And what triggered this actually was I was watching an interview from Hot 97 with Migos. And it was just interesting. I'm fascinated by the music. Their interviews are not very good because they don't really have that much to say, which is not surprising because if you listen to the content on their albums, or their singles at least. I don't even listen to their albums, but their singles, they don't really have a lot to say. They're not very articulate, but they do make really good music, and I do think this is their moment, and they're at their peak now, and they're running rap at the moment. And I'm impressed by what they do and how they've done it, and especially that this is not a group that is controlled by a big corporation. I don't think Migos would have happened 10 years ago or 20 years ago. I think this could have only happened now because of the mixtape scene that we have now, where you can put a mixtape on the internet and everyone can hear it. You can be self-sufficient. Like, you don't need a machine behind you anymore. And they put out their music and they got popular. But if they went into to have an interview, if they went to have an audition, they would not have made it. So I'm glad that we live in this time. And one thing that's returned actually is popular hip hop acts that are not popular in the charts. So even though they're number one, people don't know who Migos are. So we're back to that. We're back to hip hop being partially underground, and I like that. I think hip hop was better when it was like that because it was specifically for us. You know, they made music for us. This music suits hip hop fans, not pop fans. So while Drake's still running he's doing well on the national charts with a lot of his songs. People like Migos, they're known well to us, but not to everyone else. So I'm good with that. But it was interesting seeing the dynamic between the three of them. Like Quavo was the one who was doing most of the talking. The other two were fairly quiet. It was good that the third one, who's Offset, he had the chorus in Bad and Bougie, and he's always been sidelined, and now he's the front of that song, which is really good. So the balances it out. I was worried a bit that they might break up because they're not very equal as a group, but when he was in jail, they had money waiting for him, and they brought him back into the group, and they're actually blood relatives, so that helps a lot. And, you know, they were together when they weren't famous as well, so that helps too. But yeah, they just make catchy music. They've got an album called Culture that's out. They have a new single called T-Shirt, which doesn't really have that much of a chorus. Like, Takeoff has taken over. These are their names, by the way. When I say Offset, Takeoff, and Quavo, that's the names of the members of the group. And Takeoff his choruses don't really work very well because you can't really hear clearly what he's saying. Quavo usually takes over the choruses and he's a bit clearer, but I don't know. Takeoff had his moment and he hasn't really capitalized on it. Like there's no part of the song T-Shirt, there's no part of it where you can say, oh, this is the chorus. This is the part that everyone's going to sing along to. The chorus sounds exactly like the verse. So I think that was a bit of a failure. But the music video itself looks really good because they're in the snow and they're wearing sort of caveman fur type clothes. I think they just like skinned an animal and then put the furs on. So they're covered in all of that stuff. And it's original. Like they've done the general stuff, you know, bling in front of cars, blah, 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 parties. Now they're trying something different in a video, and I appreciate that originality. And they don't look too bad as well. The song has bounce, but it's not going to take over the charts. But I think based on their previous success, like it's going to sell based on their previous success, but not that greatly. So that's the story of Migos, and yeah, they're at their peak right now. And they have an album coming out, which helps. And not a lot of people are putting out albums anymore. They'll just put out mixtapes. But these guys, this is their second album. They're putting it out, and I think that's good. I think I like albums. I want albums to continue. Because you put more effort in an album than a mixtape. Mixtapes are very disposable. So then the other act that's coming out now is Prodigy from Mobb Deep. And it's been a while since the peak of Mobb Deep. So Prodigy's gone solo. He's done quite a few solo albums. The group has not disbanded. They did have a bit of a falling out, but they haven't disbanded. And I think they put out some material a couple of years ago, but they're not like back together full time. I think they're fully solo artists now, but they might come back to do a couple of to do an album here or there. Kind of like the Lox, who have put out an album last month. So it's good that people are still together. But the album that Prodigy dropped is called the Hegelian Dialectic. It's hard to say, and it's not clear to anyone what it means unless you actually find out. But there was an interview with allhiphop.com, and he was explaining it, and he said there's a guy called Hegel who came up with a theory, or he was saying that he was explaining how governments work and how they control us, and he was saying that they will create a problem, a fake problem, and then people will respond to that problem and demand a solution, and then the government will provide the solution. But overall, there was no original problem. The government just invented that problem so that people would ask for that specific solution, which they had planned already. You know, they wanted this solution in the first place. So that's what the title means. And he's definitely a woke rapper. Like now, he's not... I mean, he's still fairly... Like in his early solo career, he was definitely still murder obsessed. And I believe that he will be like that till he dies. But he's definitely talking a lot of sense and a lot of intelligence. And it's quite surprising how he switched from like the most ghetto killer to now he's turning into a Nas figure. You know, he's telling people he's teaching people a lot of things, and he's saying a lot of intelligent things, and you can see clearly that he's living a much cleaner life. His skin looks really good. He looks really focused. Like with a lot of rappers, when they go to interviews, you can see that their eyes are heavy because they do a lot of drugs and they drink a lot. And they're probably, like the night before, up really late, either working in the studio or partying. But you can see that they're not all there. But he looked fresh, super fresh. So you can see that he's living right. And he even put out a cookbook. So I was impressed by this interview and hearing a lot of what he was saying and just his mindset. And I kind of missed that from hip-hop. So I'm glad one of the elder statesmen of hip-hop is doing that. It's a shame he's not popular at the moment. He'll always have that fan base, though. And he'll always get interest when he puts out an interview or an album. People are always going to go and check for it. So he'll be able to continue his solo career indefinitely. And it's interesting that he was saying that it's not that he's changed suddenly, because he wanted to put the stuff out before, but he didn't want to alienate the fan base. And so now it's the time to do it. I suspect because the fan base is small now, and they're much older as well. I think his fan base will be a similar age to him. So now is the time. He couldn't do it when he was more popular, but I don't blame him for that, because what can you do? What can he do? But I'm glad he's at that point now. I hope it influences people and just gets us thinking a bit more about everything. So I'm looking forward to hearing, well, that one. And the Migos one, I'll give it a listen. I haven't heard either of them yet. I'm not really huge fans of these guys' solo lives anyway. So that's why I haven't really had a listen to it so far. But I'm interested in the acts themselves, like listening to these interviews. I'm fascinated by Prodigy's interview, and I'm just fascinated by Migos' career, what they've managed to do, and how they are very hip hop. They're very street. They're very hood, but they're very hip hop, really. I mean, they talk all that street stuff, but not hugely. They're not. I'm going back to Migos, but they're not so much gangster rappers anymore. Like, they talk about drugs and guns, they'll mention them, but like they have media training, and they're careful not to insult anyone. They're careful to be they just don't want to talk in interviews. I think because they don't want to annoy anyone or offend anyone, and it's just interesting the way rappers have changed now. So they kind of... Yeah. Anyway, so these are the two fascinating acts that are coming out with music now. So I suggest give them a listen, have a go. And it's good to have that balance of sort of ignorant party rap and then really thoughtful, conscious rap. So it's good to have that balance of both. So I suggest you give them a listen. I'm going to go give them a listen myself, and I'll be back next week with more news.